Hey, the Roadman, Kenny Rhoda here, and welcome to another edition of the Reg Eye and Rhoda podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Thrilled to have our producer extraordinaire, Dave Emmert, manning the dials and making sure this reaches you in the podcatosphere, as we like to say on this podcast. We have a very special show for you tonight with a very special guest joining us, and we'll tell you who that is coming up here in a second. But Reg, are you ready to go down memory lane and go a little old school sports talk in tonight's podcast?
Yeah, Rhoda, you know I am 30 years burning back down the road where it all began, and when to me, sports talk was vibrant and strong and worth something here in Cleveland, Ohio.
30 years, and our guest told me, he goes, it's going to be 30 years in August. So that means we're dating back to 1991 is when it really got rocking and rolling. And so the 30th anniversary of WKNR radio coming up. It started as Sports Talk 1220 WKNR. Now it's known as ESPN Cleveland WKNR with the likes of Emmett Golden, Gerard Cherry, Tony Rizzo, Aaron Goldhammer, to name a few of the guys that are on the air now. But what we're going to do tonight, our focus is going to be on the frat house that was in Broadview Heights. And joining us to reminisce about those glory days of WKNR, the one, the only, one of the founding fathers, you could say, from 1991. It makes him sound older than he is, but he is that old. It's the Dean of Sports, Greg Brinda, joining us on the R&R podcast. How are you, Mr. Brinda?
I'm great. Who are you guys? I've never heard of you. Who are you guys? Somebody just said, call me up. Who are these guys? What's up, Reg?
Brenda, how you doing? Always great to hear from you and see you. Yeah, this is going to be a fun.
I'm just sitting on the back porch listening to the rain, and we're good here.
You got your Manhattan? Is that what you told us that your drink of choice
is
now?
Mary earlier. I really don't make a Manhattan. There's too much going on in that drink. So I usually have a Manhattan when I'm out. So I can make something simple here, but Manhattan is a little complicated if you want to make it right. So
okay,
I usually have that
margarita
in a nice restaurant. But
I'm a margarita guy. I'm Mr. Tequila. I like to try all the movie stars tequila, or the rock stars tequila, Sammy Hagar, The Rock, and some of the other ones that have those tequilas out there. So that, Reg, what's your drink of choice?
I always gave Brenda a whole lot of play because, Jack Daniel's neat, man. Jack Daniel's neat, maybe with a cube or two, but Brenda, I know you've gone down that road with me before.
Well, I'm not a vodka guy. I do a little bit of rum occasionally. Tequila only if you're doing shots. Scotch. I like Dewar's, and that was an acquired taste that started when I was 17. So I had plenty of years. I had a few years to build that up.
Jack.
And then bourbon, I like Bullet bourbon. I do like Jack. My bourbon now would be Bullet bourbon. And that's really good. So basically I drink a lot of alcohol now. So that's okay.
Don't we all, especially during the quarantine and the pandemic that was the last year. So
aging will do that to you, fellas.
Sure.
Aging will, let me have a drink.
Let's see what affected our memory more, right? Either the aging or the alcohol or the quarantine or all of the above. But Mr. Brinda, when I reached out to you, okay, and you told me August of this year is going to be the 30th anniversary of basically the start of WKNR from 1991. And you were part of the original lineup. You gave it to me. Here it was in August of 91. Robert J. Wright, 6 to 10 a.m. got it started in the morning. The Dean of Sports, Greg Brinda, 10 to 2 p.m., followed by Peter Brown from 2 to 5. And then gang neighbors, the professor, Jeff Sindelar, from 5 to 8. Reggie Rucker winding things down locally, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then Ron Barr overnight until we started it all over again in 1991. And Greg, let's go back there because, like I said, you're one of the founding fathers. What do you remember about getting interviewed for the job, taking the job there, and launching what is now 30 years in the making?
Well, I actually got fired from ERE right after the last event I did at ERE was I hosted the Bud Grand Prix down at Berkeley Lakefront Airport that weekend, 4th of July weekend. And then I was off for 2 months, but I was, I negotiated a good buyout and I really didn't have to work. And Jim Glass had already interviewed me, and I kind of knew that at some point I was going to do something for KNR if it was going to be a go to do all sports in August of 91. So I had a pretty good feeling that this was going to happen. And I really wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. But it so happened that he said, "Hey, do you want to do 10 to 2? We're starting." Actually, we started the Monday after the Browns and Cowboys in 91. And then we went from there. That's where it all began. Sindelar was, as we said, was already there. Reggie Rucker was already there. So they were in place. And it was just me and Peter Brown were at it. And it was the first time I met Peter Brown was on that Sunday of the Browns-Dallas Cowboys game. Robert Wright actually came about a few weeks later. I think we still did a few weeks of country music because Robert was doing radio somewhere else and couldn't get out of it. And he joined us a few weeks later, probably middle of September, before it all became official. And Robert was not a sports guy. He was more of the, morning drive, all-purpose entertainment guy.
All right, Brenda, 91 is when you jump on board. Reg, what's your first recollection of, when you graced the airwaves of Sports Talk 1220 WKNR?
Yeah, at the time, of course, just a year and a half before, Sports Channel Ohio, Cablevision, had come to Cleveland on the television side and had gotten the cable rights to the Indians and the Cavaliers, and we're doing Brown shows at the time. So, yeah, I came on with them actually in the fall of '89 and did the Indians, the Browns, and the Cavaliers pregame and postgame shows for all three of them. And Greg mentioned Jim Glass. And Jim Glass got a hold of me and asked me if I'd, want to do fill-in weekends and the Browns pre-post game show. And at the time, I was united with the late great Jug Dish, as you call him, Mr. Rhoda, the late Bill Needle. And we did 6 hours every Sunday with Browns pregame, and you had to be on the air through the game, of course, so nobody's listening to you. At the time, nobody listened to us at all, because even in the Browns, you're either at the Browns game if they're at home, you're watching it if they're on the road, and of course, so we turned into just pretty much doing after points were scored and during plays, kind of recapping it. But I really enjoyed that. The one thing I said about Jim Glass is a little bit into that. He offered me a full-time chair to be a sports talk host.
Right.
And at the time, I was really happy I really enjoyed it, doing weekends, a little fill-in when I could, and like I said, the Brown stuff. And I'll never forget Jim Glass. He said to me, I said, "No, Jim, I'm just going to stay where I'm at. I appreciate it. I love being with you, but I want to just stay right here." And he told me, he said, "You're making a real big mistake." He said, "This TV thing is not going to work out for you. You'd be much better off doing." I'm the honest to God. And I smiled then, and I smiled at him then, and I said, "Yeah, well, you know what? You may be right. We'll see, but I'm going to stay where I'm at right now." So, but yeah, no, I enjoyed it very, very much. And like I said, those every Sunday during the football season, we did that, I think, for 4 years, Needle and I, doing the Browns pre and post game shows. And so that always left a real strong impression upon me. And I loved that. Just loved doing that show with Bill Needle.
You mentioned Cablevision. That's where I was at the time. I was coming out of college at Baldwin Wallace. Bob Urban hired me at what was, let me see, I'll get this right. I think it was Shamrock Cable that became Complexa Cable that became Cablevision, owned by the Dolans, who then went and started up WKNR, right?
Yeah.
So I'm working in local access at Cablevision, doing high school play-by-play, college play-by-play, along with beauty pageants and home day parades, and I'm doing council meetings that are 8 hours long and all these filibustering politicians.
Yeah.
And I did all that just so I could do a high school football game every week, right? But it was great experience because I had to do a little bit of everything. And then I come to find out that Cablevision, they own WKNR, and somebody reached out to me, Greg, you'll remember the 2020 tickers. They needed ticker guys and gals. And so Jack Callahan is the one who hired me part-time originally at WKNR, I think much to the chagrin of Jim Glass, who never really liked me for whatever reason. I still don't know why to this day, but enough to allow me to come on board as a 2020 ticker guy. So while you guys were hosting, I was, doing 3 1-minute to 2-minute updates every hour as the 2020 ticker guy, along with the likes of a Pam Ward and a Kevin Connors and some of the other people that started way back when doing the tickers. And that's how I got started back. I think it was 92 or 93, late 92, beginning of 93.
I want to bring up another name and have Greg take it away. The guy that left an indelible impression upon me, New York City guy through and through, Frank Mancini, that came in. Remember him, Greg, the GM? Frank.
Frank.
He had the pinky ring on every day. Yeah. He'd wear he'd always have a suit on, suit and tie, come in, the pinky rings. He was Cablevision, New York City, Midtown Manhattan through and through. I like Frank a lot too. He's a real guy, and really didn't quite understand what Cleveland sports was all about, but he was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, we always thought that Frank was on scholarship at KNR because we didn't really know other than he was Jim Glass's boss, and he really didn't do much. I got to know Frank pretty well actually. And so I just want to fast forward. So it's 96 and the Indians are playing the Orioles in the postseason, Reg.
Yep.
And I'm in Baltimore, and Mancini is there with me. We're the only two from KNR. Me and Mancini for no other reason other than he could go because he wanted to. And we were staying at the hotel across from the ballpark. So the first night, I don't even remember. He said, we're going to go eat at this Italian restaurant in Little Italy in Baltimore. Yep. Mm-hmm. I said, okay. I said, well, I will pick up a cab. He said, oh, no, they're going to come pick us up. And I go, what do you mean they're going to come pick us up? He said, oh, there's going to be a town car coming to pick us up, to take us to the restaurant. And then when we're done, we're going to take us back to the hotel. And I'm going, seriously? You go, oh, yeah. So town car shows up. We go to this restaurant. I don't remember the name. All I can tell you, it was the best veal chop I've ever had, and probably will never have one better than that. Wherever this restaurant was.
I bet it was Mimo's.
It might have been.
Yeah.
But it was something. He knew the great places to eat, and he was he was in the music business in the 60s. He was actually one of the advancement for the Cowsills. He knew Merv Griffin really well. I mean, he really knew the music industry, and we used to just sit and talk music in his office before I went on the air, or after I was on the air, because he just knew so much about the business. So yeah, Frank, I think Frank passed away about 5-6 years ago, and but cool, a very cool guy to say the least.
Frank Mancini, the one thing I'll always remember about him, when my dad passed away in 1998, Frank and Jim actually drove to Springdale, Pennsylvania, came to the funeral, and then just drove back to that night. So that's, again, I'd say Jim really didn't like me. And we'll get into that maybe a little later, but he and Frank did drive out. I'll never forget that. So, that name that you brought up, and yes, he was on scholarship. He had the greatest job ever, I think, of anybody, right? As we were, being a part of something special that here we are 30 years later, guys. Think about that now. I remember sitting in the conference room at a meeting, and there was a prominent Cleveland broadcaster who said to somebody who was in our meeting, he was related to them, that sports talk would never work. It's never going to last, in Cleveland. Okay. And Reg, you were getting the opposite of come do sports talk because you're not going to do the TV thing. So it was interesting the way it was being perceived. But here it is, 30 years later, it's, we're not there, but it's still going, in the Cleveland market with another sports talk station as well. So, Greg, what does KNR mean in Cleveland when we look back on this and the sports town that it is? What do you think of, or what are you most proud of when you think of WKNR being a part of the opening lineup to where we are today, I guess? And you're still working on TAM. Reg is still doing TV. I'm out in Canton and everything. But KNR means something special to all of us. What's it mean to you?
It was just, sports talk started to explode when FAN went on the air in '87. That's when Pete Franklin left and he went to FAN. I was vying for the job along with Danny Coughlin and Bruce Drennan. And Glass was the program director back then. And it was kind of preordained that Drennan would get the job. And Drennan got the job. And I was competing against him on 1300 on a 5,000 watt radio station. I beat him 2 books in a row. And literally, that was the beginning of the end of Drennan on then 3WE. So I just wanted to make mention about someone saying sports talk would never work. Was a broadcaster. He might be retired. Worked for CBS Radio for a long time. Dave Popovich. You may know him. And one day, we never really connected. We just, I don't know. It's in those businesses where people have certain biases against certain people for you don't really know why. So at the time when we started, Craig Carton was doing Sportsline on 3WE, and I remember running into Popovich one day and he said, "Oh, you guys aren't gonna," he said, "Hey, I'm sorry, you guys aren't gonna make it. I like all you guys there, but at some point you guys are gonna go under, blah, 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 blah." Well, Sindelar annihilated Craig Carton, just annihilated Craig Carton, sent him, off to the moon. And we never, here we are 30 years later, KNR didn't end. I think KNR established itself as, a pretty powerful station. We had the Indians during the 95, 96, 97 run. If there wasn't a better time to have the Indians, in fact, in 92, I think we got the Indians for the first time for whatever reason. At that point, 3WE gave up the rights.
Right.
And we stopped them up. And I know we overpaid for them and our signal sucked at night, but the Indians wanted the money and they took us. And I think what helped immensely was we were the flagship station when Progressive Field opened up. We were the flagship station during the big run through 97. So you couldn't tie the station and an event going on. You also had the Browns leaving in 95. We were at the focal point of everything. I remember being on a stage with everybody as the Browns were leaving town, as horrible as that was. So, and we also had the Browns. So at one point we had, like you said, we had the Browns. We had the Browns as they were leaving.
Right.
And we had the Indians during the heyday. So, at that point, we were the thing, and everybody else was just a non-entity or small potatoes. I know HK had sports talk, and, at that time, 3WE attempted it, but we were the kings. We really were the kings.
Reg, what about you when you look back on it? What stands out most?
I felt the very same way. Because, as I said, one of the reasons that intrigued me about wanting to do it, even in a weekend fill-in specialty show role, if you like, on shows, is because of what I thought to be the opportunity. And Brenda, you, and especially Jeff Sindelar, a large part of that. And I thought they made a real strong move at the time in bringing in Peter Brown. I thought, again, you bring a New York Philly guy in that's coming in and with guns a-blazing, and he's coming in to really ruffle a lot of feathers here and tell you why that, whether it was an act contrived or not, Peter came in and did exactly what was needed to, I think, strengthen and give a lot of strong meaning to how KNR started. So to me, it was, see, that's to me, if you want to call it meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts, that's fine. And I, I know I sound like, an old dinosaur, because I know that's not what sports talk is today, but it was then. And that's what attracted me the most, is that, to me, we had guys that were knowledgeable, caring sports guys that weren't afraid to speak their minds, but it wasn't some dog and pony show that they pick people off the ice cream stand to come in and host shows. Led by Sindelar, this, I think, to me, it was something that, hey, this has strength, this has opportunity to take over the market. And yeah, so that's what attracted it to me, and why I was, like I said, I was more starting. I was in the TV thing by that time, but whatever I could do and be a part of it, it was something I really loved and really enjoyed.
When I found out there was a radio station and all they were going to be doing was sports, I had to be a part of it in whatever way, shape, or form. I wanted to be a part of it, right? So that's why they offered a part-time ticker job, and I jumped on it while I was still working full-time at Cablevision. So I'm doing two jobs just to be a part of that, hoping that maybe I would get hired full-time as a ticker guy, where I could leave the council meetings and the home days and beauty pageants and just talk sports, and then, maybe get a chance to fill in on the weekends or when somebody was sick or holidays and all of that. So for me, it was a dream come true. That's what I wanted. I grew up in Pittsburgh. Heaven forbid we talk about that, right? A guy coming from Pittsburgh to do sports radio in Cleveland. But I listened to Bob Prince, and I listened to Myron Cope and Bill Hillgrove, and that's what my dad and I, we listened to the radio and the talk shows and everything. So that's what I wanted to do, more so than the play-by-play I was originally doing on TV, Greg. And for me, it was a dream.
Hey guys, I will say this. I think having like you, Kenny, and Peter, it took Cleveland sports fans out of their comfort level, because we weren't all homers. Peter certainly wasn't one. You were from Pittsburgh,
right?
So we weren't homers, and we added a little diversity to the station, because we weren't all on the same page a lot of times. And I think that really helped.
I agree with you 100%. Peter, tell me the truth. I still remember that. He and Larry Nance, for whatever reason, he ruffled everybody's feathers with that. So, you're right. And, the old Howard Stern from, his movie Private Parts, 50% of the people hate him, 50% of the people love him, but everybody's going to listen, right? So, that was part of it. And that's why that lineup originally of Wright, Brenda, Brown, Sindelar, and Rucker, you had a little bit of everything in there for, different people. And so you tuned in to whatever time you were able to listen, or to whoever was your favorite. And there was a wide variety. And then here's what I'm going to do now, guys. From that, I'm going to rattle off a bunch of names here. Okay. And then you guys, I'm going to stop after like 10 names, right? And then you guys pick a name and tell a story. That's what our listeners here on the Press Play Podcast networks here on the R&R podcast want to hear. All right. So here we go. In no particular order. And if I forget somebody by the time we're done with this podcast, I apologize. But as Greg Brenda told me the other day, we don't remember what we had for breakfast, right, Roadman? No, we don't. So we're going to forget some people. So I apologize in advance. Here we go. Kendall Lewis, Jeff Sindelar, Peter Brown, Bill Needle, Bruce Drennan, Alan Davis, Mark Wolf, Thor Tolo, Paul Topier. And I'll stop right there, and I'll go to you, Brenda. From that list of names, give me something that you remember, or you have a story about one of those first few people I've told you about there.
I'll give you two. First one with Kendall. So Kendall and I started doing a show from 9 to noon. All right. And at some point in the, I'm just trying to think, in the 2000s, maybe at some point, early 2000s.
Right.
I had just gotten a weekend gig. So I replaced Peter Brown from 2 to 5 when Peter left. Peter wanted like a lot of money. They said no. And then I replaced Peter, and then Bill Needle replaced me from 10 to 2. Okay.
Yep.
So then in 98, I knew the program director, and we had known each other. He was at the Fan for a while. We just got to know each other. said, when you kind of want to do a weekend at ESPN, I said, oh my God, yeah. So I ended up doing Weekend Game Night with Tony Bruno and Chuck Wilson. And I actually replaced Peter Brown, who got too big and said, I don't need ESPN, and left, and that was it. So that's actually pretty funny. So getting back to, so on Monday morning, at some point, Monday mornings, when I was doing morning drive, I was doing it from there, like in ancient history. And then when I started doing 9 to noon, I had to get on a plane at 6:45 in Hartford in the morning on Monday morning. And I always would make a bet with the BSK that I will beat you to work, coming to work on an airplane, than you driving from UK. And trust me, most of the time I beat him to work.
BSK kind of walked in, he was one of those that walked in at 3 minutes to the hour.
Well, he had all the knowledge in his head. He was ready to go. The late, great Kendall Lewis, right? The BSK didn't need to prep for a half an hour with you, Brenda.
Right. No. Right. Yeah. And the other thing with Mike Wolf, I got 2 quick stories with Mike Wolf. So when the Indians are in the 95 playoffs, all right, I go to Boston by myself. Then I go to Seattle. I went to Seattle twice in a week. And then we all went to Atlanta, Reg, and we did our shows from a bar called Jocks and Jill's.
Oh yeah, know it well.
Okay. Craig Sager's bar. I think
Craig Sager's bar. That's a late Craig Sager, yes.
Right. The late great. He owned that. So we did these shoot. So we stayed at the JW Marriott in Buckhead. It was oh my God, what a nice hotel.
Beautiful.
And Wolf had like 1 pair of pants, 2 shirts, but he would have a suitcase full of shoes, and he never wore socks.
Right.
And I go, what are you, a woman? Like you just, you have no clothes, but you have 15 pairs of shoes. And he brought that. You're crazy. That's nuts. But he was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the late Mike Wolf, he has since passed on, as has Kendall. I went to Kendall's funeral, taken far too early, and just a fantastic guy and a great guy to work with. And he was, Mr. Buckeye before I jumped on the Jim Tressel bandwagon. Kendall was, singing the fight song and everything during those years, and was a good friend over the years as well. So sad to see him go so young. What about you, Reg, from some of those names that I read to you?
Well, I really kind of developed somewhat of, I'd say, maybe off the air, closer friendship with the late Bill Needle than I ever thought I would. I had tremendous amount of respect for him. Bill was extremely intelligent. All right. Extremely bright, extremely intelligent. And I know a lot of people thought, man, this guy, he's arrogant, he's abrasive, he is not the kind of guy personality-wise that you want to hang out with and hitch your wagon to. But, I tell you what, as time went by and as the years went by, and listen, I grew up on the streets of Detroit, man. So that none of that was anything new to me. Okay. I mean, my whole life through 18 years of age was with guys and gals like that every day. I mean, if you weren't running your mouth and, flaunting your own self, is like, what the hell's wrong with this person? He's never going to make it in doing anything, or she. So Bill, like I said, the man, I found him to be, if you allowed yourself to, again, have an open mind and look into it, Bill, extremely bright. One of the brightest guys that I've ever been around. I mean, I would look at him at times like, damn, I mean, this is high level stuff. And I don't mean just on sports either.
Right.
I mean, just on everything in life. So I really enjoyed Bill. I really enjoyed him as a partner and as a guy and as a man and becoming a friend. And I know I could tell that's not how he's thought of by too many around here, because he did have that abrasive way. But to me, it really was, it didn't mean anything to me in terms of negativity at all. And, Bill was, I kind of think Greg, he kind of led the way with you guys, you regular guys. I mean, he was, he would go at it with Jim Glass and
Oh yeah, right.
Jim O'Brien, right? Is it Jim
Yep.
O'Brien?
Jim
Yeah,
O'Brien.
Jim O'Brien.
Remember
Yeah.
him?
He's
Not
an
so
actor
much
in Hollywood now. Yeah,
I know.
I keep in touch with him on
Yes.
Facebook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Not so much Mancini, but those two.
Yeah.
And basically, Needle told them both, "You're full of, you're full of it. You don't know nothing about anything here with regard to sports." And you know me, I mean, I love that that Needle
Right.
would do that, and so just so many great memories with him. And then, of course, he became while I was calling the Cavaliers on television, he was had a stint as the pre and post game guy. So and they traveled him when we were on the road, so we spent more time together. And I really grew in a great appreciation for Bill Needle, and I think he had an extremely strong impact on sports talk in this market at KNR.
What was it? You guys had Trick Bag Punks.
Yes.
What was his favorite line?
The best line. I know this, Greg.
Brother
okay?
knows.
I know this because the caller called up and said, Bill Needle, you don't know anything about basketball. Just because you were the water boy for the Atlanta Hawks, you have no idea what you're talking about with basketball, even though you think you do. And he said, and I wrote it down, Greg, listen here, you booger-eating moron. And he just ripped the guy to shreds for the next 10 minutes and went to break. And I'll never forget it because I was doing updates that day for him.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you a quick Bill Needle story, guys. Reg, you'd appreciate this.
Yes.
So Bill was the PR guy for the Cavs for a little bit. You remember that?
Right before he went to Atlanta. Yeah.
Yeah. Right before he went to Atlanta. And so one day, I think we were just talking about great NBA players, including Bill Russell. And you know that Bill Russell never signed autographs. Bill Russell was not an autograph guy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you went into the press room, you had to sign the ledger that you were going to eat. And Needle said, that's how I got his autograph. He said, I ripped the page out of the ledger with Bill Russell's autograph on there. He goes, and that's how I got Bill Russell's autograph. He would never sign for it. I don't think today he just doesn't sign. He'll talk to you, but he just doesn't sign autographs. But
Genius.
where Bill, he said he had it one day. I think he might have been doing a broadcast and he had a sign and never thought about it. And Bill said, there's my autograph.
NBA savant, too, guys.
Yeah.
Kenny, Greg, NBA savant, knew the league, man, inside out and up and down. And as I started to do play-by-play on the TV side for the Cavs in the 1993 season, listen, I picked Needle's brain about a lot of things with the league. And the thing, too, I'm going in with, first time when I met Mike Fratello, and, of course, Needle had years of experience with Mike during the Atlanta Hawk days with those Dominique Wilkins and, Doc Rivers teams that were very, very good. Playoffs every year. They just couldn't beat the Boston Celtics. I mean, nobody could, but Atlanta would win 55 to 60 games and then get knocked out by Boston. Virtually every year. But Needle was with Mike Fratello during that period of time. So he was, he was a great sounding board, talking piece, and earpiece for me as I started in the league.
All right, we got to get a break in right now on the R&R podcast. We'll come back, and I'm going to tell you my thoughts about the late, great Jeff Sindelar and what he meant to me. That's next here on the Reg Iron Rhoda podcast.
For the Dennis Maniloff Show, I'll tap into my 40-plus years of following Cleveland sports and 30-plus years of writing and talking about them, so as to bring you informed opinions and analysis of your favorite players and teams. I also will monitor the national sports scene and, when warranted, step out of the toy department and into the real world. And I'll always be on the lookout for special guests. By all means, join us.
Hey there, this is Brent Spillin, co-host of a Swingin' a Tribe MLB podcast. Listen, we're just a couple of fans who love to talk everything Cleveland Indians baseball. If you're a fan like us, then this is the podcast for you. Go Tribe.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading,
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
the sports podcast for the sports collector.
Continue taking a trip down memory lane here. 30th anniversary of the birth of Sports Talk Radio, AM 1220 WKNR in Cleveland, coming up in August of this year. 1991 was the year that it officially started, with the lineup of Robert J. Wright, Greg Brenda, Peter Brown, Jeff Sindelar, and Reggie Rucker. And Reg and I are happy to have Greg Brenda with us here today, looking back on those years. And guys, I've got to mention the professor, because as I've told you guys already, Jeff Sindelar, for whatever reason, and I still to this day, I don't know why, and I never asked him, and unfortunately, again, he passed away far too young, but he took a liking to me for some reason. And, I don't know if he knew my first name for the first 3 or 4 years I was there, but he knew my last name. And everywhere I'd, Rhoda, come here a second. And he would just yell it out, right? So I was doing updates, and I was totally shocked the first time he asked me to stay on after I did an update, right? So here's the professor, guy that I was in awe of, along with everybody else in that lineup, and I wanted to be like you guys. And he's, stick around, I got to ask you something. And he then made a habit of it. And again, I don't think Jim Glass liked that, but it helped me become more confident and comfortable on the air, where I wasn't just reading my script and doing updates. It allowed me to, as you like to say, Reg, opine on some things. And he took a liking to me and ended up being a mentor for me, where he would call me on the phone even back then after hearing me talk about something or do an update or tell me, you got that wrong. It wasn't in the bottom of the 8th inning, Rhoda. It was the bottom of the, so whatever it was. And and we became friends throughout our working days and after he left KNR because of fantasy sports. He loved fantasy sports. And so I was in his fantasy football league for, up until he passed away all those years. And his son, Adam, has become a good friend of mine. And I learned so much from him. And to this day, the stories that we tell about, Jeff on the air pale in comparison to what was said off the air with Jeff Sindelar and the language that he would use, that today on a podcast, it would be radio gold or podcast gold. And so for me, of those names I read to you, Jeff meant a lot to me, and I still keep in touch with his son, Adam, to this day. And, he was, you had the dean and the prof. What more did you need in a lineup on Sports Talk, right? I mean, you learned right there.
And Greg, I want to get your thoughts on the professor, Jeff Sindelar, because you two are peers, right? You're working together. You're both hosting talk shows back to back in most occasions throughout the early part, and even as KNR went along. What was your relationship like with Jeff? Both, was there one professionally as opposed to one personally? And again, just all that constituted Jeff Sindelar with you as KNR began.
Well, at one point we were competitors when he eventually took the 3WE job after Drennan, and then I was still on ERE. But we got to know each other because we both liked collectibles. He was at a much higher level of collecting than I was. I just like baseball cards. He basically started the business of collectibles. That he and his two buddies, back in the late 70s, when things started to heat up a little bit about the value of cards, they would go to different cities, rent a hotel room, take an ad out in a newspaper saying, we'll buy your baseball cards from you. And people would come in and unload them for literally pennies on the dollar. And because of that, he just started this collectible. His collection was incredible. It really was. And we really kind of bonded just talking about stuff. I mean, he had stuff. You're still friends with Adam, Kenny.
Yeah.
I hope Adam still has half the stuff his dad had, because it has to be worth an incredible fortune.
Millions,
plus,
Greg.
it's
right?
just,
Seriously.
I would say millions, just because of the stuff that he collected, odd stuff besides the cards that just is remarkable. The thing about Jeff, guys, was I know he liked other things, but his ability to absorb sports news and facts in vast amounts is truly unmatched by anybody that I've ever known.
I agree, Greg. Photographic memory at times, right? With certain things.
It would have to be. You know, I like sports, but on Saturday night, Holly and I are watching a movie or we're watching something else. I really don't care about the NBA Saturday night game. Right. Jeff would watch the NBA Saturday night game.
Yep.
And I just, you know, I'm watching a movie. I'm watching something on Netflix. I'm interested in too many other things other than sports. Jeff, I think, was interested in sports 95% and 5% some other. He liked old TV shows. The only other thing that we ever talked about was old TV shows and sports. I'm not sure if he liked anything else other than those two things.
The Honeymooners and Andy Griffith were two of his favorite shows. Yeah, exactly. He had every episode of the Andy Griffith. Is it Griffin or Andy Griffith show, right? Griffith, he had every episode of that, every single one as part of his, you know, collectibles, Greg. He had that. So you're absolutely right about that. And he was one of a kind, no question about it. All right, I've got other names because there are a ton to get through, guys. You ready? Here's your next list of names. Dave Milo, Rich Passon, the late John Antis, Barry Butel, Jim Isabella, Gary Jeter, Bruce Drennan, Ray Unucci, Dave Denholm, and I'll stop here at Karlovic. Bob Karlovic. So, Reg, you start on this one. Give me something out of that list.
Karlovic, the man who kept Sindelar somewhat in check when necessary. The man who probably had the only voice that, although Sindelar would be feisty to him too, sweet man. I love Bob Karlovic, just as a heart of gold and a guy that, I mean, and as time went on, then in the later stages of KNR, now this is after my stint on the TV side was done, I always felt bad because I genuinely liked him so much. But during those LeBron playoff years, that's when the current management at KNR came to me and said, we'd really like you to do the, the Cavaliers postgame show. Well, Bob was doing that.
Right.
And, I'm going to show you that not every ego-driven centric broadcaster is, and as I said, I'll come on, keep Bob too. I mean, I know I'll come on, make me the analyst or whatever. No. Either you want it, you're going to do it or not. So I always felt I had a lot of bad feeling about that so many times, and had long conversations with Bob about it, and he was absolutely gracious and graceful, as he always is, and we continued a strong friendship. But to me, honestly, too nice a guy with too good a heart to be dealing with all the stuff that he ultimately did with at KNR.
What about you, Greg, from that list of Milo, Passon, Antis, Butel, Isabella, Rucker, Jeter, Ronnie Duncan, Ray Unucci, Dave Denholm, and Bob Karlovic?
Quick stories. I think Barry Butel went on to do hockey in Phoenix.
Oh, I'll get to him in a second. Yes, because I owe him part of my career. Yes, we'll get to that.
So I remember Barry. I did a Browns pregame show with Gary Jeter and Unucci for a couple of years, which was really a lot of fun. Gary Jeter went to Cathedral Latin, then went to USC, was not a Browns fan. So it made the show really, really interesting. I got a story about Isabella. So we're doing, and I think you had to be there, Kenny. We're doing the Browns draft show at a restaurant. And I don't think it was the place in Parma. It was the next place, friends of yours.
Harpo's Sports Cafe. Was it Harpo's?
Was the Harpo's in the shopping center?
Harpo's, well, it started on Brook Park Road with all the strip clubs, from the Crazy Horse to
I think it was Harpo's.
Pinkies and all that stuff. Yeah, okay.
I think it was Harpo's. So, all these places we went, they would give us food to eat. One day, Isabella comes on, and, we did these shows forever. These shows lasted like 3 hours before the draft, during the draft, after the draft. Isabella comes in about 3 hours into the show. He's going to do like the next shift. And I saw him down 3 meals in about a half an hour. And I'm looking at him and I'm going, and I'm a little like I'm getting sick. I'm going, Jim, stop eating. You can't eat that much. You got to go on the air. And I'm just like looking at him going, no human can eat that much in a short period of time, except Jim did. I'll give you the other Jim Isabella story, guys.
Yep.
Jim and I actually did, Reg, you'll like this, the first MAC football games on cable.
I remember that. Yep.
And all those guys who are technical guys are still either working for the Indians, Reg, or all the, John Warren was our director. And
Steve Warren.
Yeah, Steve Warren we did like 9 games. And he was the play, and I did the color, and we were the first people that did the MAC on cable anywhere.
Yep.
And I just remember our first game was at Ball State in Muncie, Indiana, and try to find Muncie, Indiana with a map in a driving rainstorm is not the easiest. The most fun was when we did like 3 games at Central Michigan. And like in Michigan, once you get in Michigan, you can go like 100 miles. It's like the Autobahn. You get on 23 and, you might as well be in Stuttgart because you could just fly to get to Mount Pleasant. We did one in Kalamazoo. We did Western Michigan. We did an Eastern Michigan game.
Ypsilanti.
We did one at Ohio in the old stadium and the old press box. Actually, that was a pretty fun fall, just traveling and doing those games. So, yeah, we actually did the first MAC cable broadcast ever.
That's awesome. All right, well, here's what we're going to do now, guys. This is part 1 of our trip down memory lane. We're going to bring this portion of it to an end because we're just scratching the surface, guys. All right, I knew this was going to be fun, and there was no way we were going to get one podcast out of this. So we're going to end part 1 of the Reg I and Rhoda podcast with special guest Greg Brinda, looking back on the beginning, the glory days of WKNR from August of 1991 on. And when we come back in part 2, I'm going to tell everybody why Barry Butel, a former talk show host at WKNR, meant so much to me. So stay tuned for part 2 of the R&R podcast with Greg Brinda.